1. When I was 16 years old, I decided to surprise my parents with a bouquet of flowers for Valentine's Day. We've always celebrated this as a family holiday rather than a romantic one. I didn't have a car to drive to a florist, but my high school was within walking distance of a hospital, boasting a gift shop that sells floral arrangements. Between classes, during the week of Valentine's Day, I set off for the hospital by my lonesome, cutting across campus to walk through a network of side roads, populated with specialty doctors' offices that keep odd hours. The sort of buildings where traveling doctors mainly hold surgery consultations or perform small procedures a few times a month. The trip there passed without incident. As I was walking back through sad deserted rows with a vase of flowers in tow, I noticed an unkempt 1990s car close behind me. While my memory of the car is hazy, I am left with the impression that there were at least 2 men within, whose faces I could not see. Initially, I assumed that the driver was simply afraid of hitting me, the reason they weren't passing by, so I made a point of dramatically trudging further into the grassy shoulder of the road, demonstrating to them they could safely drive ahead. They still refused to pass by me, continuing to creep along behind at a slow pace. Beginning to suspect that the driver was more interested in me than a destination, I began to walk faster. The car confirmed my suspicions by matching my speed. Despite the impracticality of my shoes and the threat of spilling water from my vase, I commenced to run as fast as I possibly could. They hit the gas and again matched my speed. I realized at this point that the car was following me, that there was no one in sight to notice, and I needed to get away. I bolted into the first parking lot that I saw. The car turned in after me. Despite there being only 2 or 3 cars in the spacious front parking lot, and there being no other sign of activity at the office, this car did not stop to park in the numerous spaces available there. The driver instead opted to pursue me into the partially under construction block portion of this lot behind the office. It passed every available parking space to corner me against a pile of debris and rubble from the construction, coming to a diagonal stop less than 3 feet away. Before anyone could emerge from the vehicle, I somehow managed to scale the small prominence of rubble against my back, vase in hand, and jumped from its peak to land painfully on the other side, which fortunately was a plot of undeveloped land within sight of my high school campus. I took a quick peek back over my shoulder to see if they were still in pursuit, but the car had sped off after I reached the top of the rubble pile, and was now nowhere in sight. They had not parked in the lot at all. They had no business there. The driver was following me. I sprinted at top speed and didn't stop until I was soaked with sweat in the dead of winter and panting in the student lounge among my classmates, who didn't seem to give a damn when I told them, possibly because our hometown is supposedly a human trafficking capital and the crime rate is outrageous. Although I'm convinced that this was something more informal than human trafficking, as the dilapidated car suggested poverty, and I've read human trafficking usually arises through grooming and not being snatched off the streets. In retrospect, I should have told an adult, alerted campus security, and called the non-emergency line of the local police station, but I was young, foolish, insecure, and afraid of getting in trouble for leaving campus when I didn't have a signed permission form permitting me to do so. I kept trying to convince myself that I had misread the situation or was overreacting. I don't know what I would have even told the police had I called them, as I was entirely ignorant on the subject of cars and couldn't have identified the make of it had I been asked, and I couldn't see the faces of the occupants. I was also worried that my parents would restrict my already extremely limited freedoms if they knew I had been in any danger. I feel horrible for having never told anyone and earnestly hope that my secrecy hasn't led to someone being hurt or killed. I believe the only missing people aside from the runaway children or elderly adults with dementia in this city right now, though, are men, aside from one woman a few decades ago. 2. This story takes place in November 2017. I was 18. I'm a very short girl, only 4'10", and I get anxious when someone even looks at me in a way to suggest they might not like me. So needless to say, I'm incredibly non-confrontational. My friend and I were out shopping. It was something we do maybe every few months just to bond, since we didn't have much time to hang out due to college. She, just like me, barely scraped 5'1", and very non-confrontational. It's probably why we became friends. On every shopping trip, we would find ourselves in Ann Summers. We're both overly endowed and struggled to find bras anywhere else. And Ann Summers always had great sales, so we'd grab at the cheap bras while we could. This shopping trip wasn't any different. We browsed shops until we got to Ann Summers, but that's when things took a turn. I'd barely stepped foot into the shop when a woman with some sort of Slavic accent stopped me. Her finger jammed into my chest. "Spit the gum out!" she demanded. Assuming she was an employee, I gave a very sheepish, "I'm really sorry," and ran out of the shop to spit the gum out and throw it away. When I went back in, I realized that this woman was not an employee. She was a customer who was browsing and happened to be near the door when my friend and I entered the shop. It should have been obvious to me at the time. No salesperson would behave like that. Not one that wanted to keep their job, anyway. But I kept my head down when I walked past her, holding my breath in the hope she wouldn't notice me again. She didn't, and I thought I was in the clear. My friend and I browsed the shop, trying to avoid the woman. But the shop wasn't very big, probably only 15 feet by 18 feet. So eventually I ended up at the sales stand by the door, where she had been stood. I tried to keep my distance while browsing. I was looking at the price tags, but realized I didn't know what the discount was, so I leaned over slightly to check the discount sign. It's important to note that this woman had a pushchair, which is a stroller for the Americans. You'd think that maybe she had a child in this pushchair, but no, it was full of plastic carrier bags. I didn't look much at it, but I could tell that everything in there was double-bagged and tied shut. Whatever was in those bags she wanted to protect. This sense of protection became very relevant because when I leant over to look at the discount sign, I was leaning slightly closer to the pushchair. Was still about 3 feet away from it, but apparently this was too close. The woman was on the other side of the chair, but the moment she saw me, she ran around to where I was stood. She hit me in the face. It was somewhere between a slap and a punch. I couldn't quite tell because I was in shock. All I knew was that it hurt. "Watch your personal space!" She hissed in my ear. I apologized to her. This woman just hit me and I apologized to her. I regret it now, but at the time I didn't want to provoke her any further. Not that I knew what I did to provoke her in the first place. In shock, I turned around and ran to the back area, grabbing my friend's hand and pulling her with me. The back area was separated by a tiny wall that only stretched halfway across the shop, since they stored the adult toys there, and wanted to keep them out of sight of the general public. I stood there holding my friend's hand and shaking as I whispered, "She just hit me," to my friend. We stood there for a good minute in silence. My friend was positioned in a way that she could see the rest of the store while I hid behind the wall. "She's gone," my friend told me. I let out a breath that I didn't know I was holding. "Can we stay in here for a while?" I asked my friend, worried that the woman would be outside waiting for me. The front of the store was open, but she could have just as easily been a couple feet down the road and out of sight, waiting for me to leave. My friend agreed, and we slowly browsed the shop again. About 5 minutes later, we got to the counter to check out. The girl working the counter looked outside and then back at us. That woman had been in here for 30 minutes. I didn't know what to do. She told the two of us. "What did she say to you?" "She told me to spit out my gum when we came in, and then she hit me because I was too close to her." I told her. "She hit you?" The worker was wide-eyed. "If I'd known that, I would have called security. I'm so sorry." I smiled and shrugged. "It's fine." It wasn't really fine, but it wasn't the worker's fault. She didn't look much older than I did, and I wouldn't have known what to do in that situation either. Still shaken up, my friend and I made our way out of the store. I looked around but didn't see the woman. "Can we go home now?" I asked my friend. We hadn't finished browsing all of the shops, but I was so paranoid that we'd bump into the woman again. She agreed, and we got the bus home. When I got home, my parents encouraged me to report the incident to the police. I called the non-emergency line, and their answer was basically, "Well, what'd you expect us to do about it?" Unless I went back to the Ann Summers and requested the security footage, which I wasn't sure they actually had, they wouldn't do anything. It's been just over 3 years, and now I'm sure that the woman was likely to have been homeless and/or on drugs. It's the only explanation I can think of for the carrier bags and her protectiveness. It was either everything she owned, or drugs, or both. So to the possibly homeless, possibly drugged-up woman who hit me, I hope that the current state of the world is treating you well, and you're finally getting the personal space you wanted. But let's not meet again. 3. It's hard for me to write this because it has only been a year since it stopped. It started in 2014, and it happened in my home country of Sweden, when I went to an art school for a summer course as a form of daily activity. The people at this art school were some of the worst people I have ever met, and that included me, because I was kind of trash back then too. I was 21 years old and had little experience of the real world. I had gone 2 extra years of school because of switching majors and taking an extra year in my second choice, so I was literally on my first year of independence. I also have a light form of autism and didn't receive schooling until I was 12, which made me a bit more slowly developed mentally during high school. I'm all caught up now. Basically, I was a 21-year-old with very little experience in life. The people I met at the art school were not, let's say, the highest of achievers. They were some of the meanest and most terrible people I have ever met. They treated each other and me awfully, as well as the teachers. But I was quite the little turd too. In fact, I feel like being around those people also made me worse. What started the stalking was an incident involving acrylic paint. It was going to be thrown away, so some of us took some of the paint so it wouldn't go to waste, and I finally took the remaining paint. Well, its owner showed up. Her name was Anna, and this is how she introduced herself. My art teacher was pushing these big tables on a trolley through the narrow passageway of the art hall, and Anna, dressed in expensive designer clothes, stood in her way. So my art teacher, not fearing anything, screams, "Move it!" Anna snaps towards her with this crazy look in her eyes and shouts, "Excuse me?" "Excuse me? Do you know who I am? I'm a famous woman." My art teacher, not impressed, responds with, "Okay, famous woman, move it." That was how we learned of Anna, the famous artist. She then proceeded to have all the terrible people of my class schmooze over her and treat her like a celebrity. But the real reason for being there was because of her paint, so the great hunt began. I was roped into it, and my initial plan was just to give her back the paint so she could be off. Except during the hunt I got these terrifying red flags. She kept sniffing the paint of other people to see if any were hers. Apparently she had poured some kind of oil into the paint so she could sniff her way to where they were. During the hunt she admitted that she had been put into treatment for the criminally insane, because she had stalked a previous schoolmate that she had thought had stolen paint from her. She even showed a CCTV video of her old schoolmate pulling a suitcase behind her, saying that's where she had the paint that she stole. I asked her how she got the video, and she said that her dad had connections with the local government, who had gotten the video from one of the local government's cameras, which is illegal for a layman to get access to. During this time, she even showed me the court document which she had saved as a PDF on her phone. During this time, she also admitted that she had been sending messages to a famous artist in Örebro because a voice from heaven told her to do it, and that he was destined to help her with her career. Anna also thought that staring wide-eyed made her even more attractive, like the kind of stare where you can't see any of the eyelids at all. So while she was saying all this, she had this crazy-eyed look in her face. I was terrified of her and couldn't figure out a way of handing back the paint, so she ended up threatening to have the principal fired if she couldn't search every room for the paint. And when she did find all of her paint, she put it in one of the school's rooms and said that she would pick it up when she wanted to. She said that she would come every year during the art exhibit to check if her paint was still there, and that she would sue the school if she found it missing. What a crazy person, end of story. Right? How I wish. About 2 years later, I enrolled in a 1-year basic art program at the school. I had completely forgotten about this crazy person. At one point, we were cleaning out the art rooms and her paint was brought up again, and it would again be thrown away. Me, not remembering that crazy, famous artist, took a nice crimson bottle for myself, while others took some of the not-ruined color, opened acrylics go bad after a while, for themselves. Then, as we all tried to continue with our lives, the crazy lady one day returned and started sniffing all the color. I didn't recognize her at all, and had forgotten how dangerously deranged she was. I had even forgotten that I had gotten the crimson color from her paint, so when she started interrogating me for why the paint smelled like hers, I didn't know what to say. She also smelled her paint at some other girl's table and was harassing her as well. Thinking that this was all more fuss than it was worth, I threw away the crimson paint. It had started to cut from age anyway. And that is when everything went to hell, and crazy-eyed Anna became my stalker. When she found out that I had thrown away the paint, she became convinced that I had re-enrolled at the art school specifically to steal her paint. She started convincing a bunch of gullible and, to be honest, low-achieving people that this was true, and I started being harassed. It started with a physical attack. I was painting alone in the evening, minding my own business, when this huge brute ran into me, tackled me to the floor, and hit and kicked me. While this was happening, crazy-eyed Anna was fake crying in the corner, but I could see on the floor how she went from fake crying into gleefully smiling as I was being kicked and hit. Another girl she had recruited picked up and smashed my phone, breaking it. As the guy stormed off and the second girl followed, I stumbled to my feet and asked Anna why she'd done this, and the answer she gave me made me realize what kind of person she was. So you will know that I can hurt you if I want. That is the answer she gave me. I later asked the brute why he had attacked me, and he said that he hate people who stole. This guy is training now to become an art teacher. I fear for those children. I had bruised my ribs, but was not allowed to go to the hospital because the principal didn't want to get involved, and since my phone was broken, I couldn't call for an ambulance, so it took so long to get to the hospital that the outside signs of abuse had healed. During this time, crazy-eyed Anna started wearing a crimson jacket wherever she went. I asked her why she was wearing it, and also said she looked pretty, thinking that talking nicely to her would start a friendly conversation, to maybe smooth everything over. Well, Anna is not like normal people and does not think like normal people. Her response was that, "I want you to think of me every time you see this color," and said that she had seen it work in a movie. She then added, "I am more beautiful than you will ever be." Wherever she went, she had a horde of schmoozers around her, all thinking she was some kind of famous and fancy artist. But eventually, she had to leave the school, and I thought I had peace. Except she one day suddenly showed up and gleefully presented me with the school's Russian exchange student. This student had been sitting at my table every day for weeks, and I hadn't paid it any mind because why would I? She was allowed to sit there. This is when crazy-eyed Anna drops the bombshell that this exchange student was A, not a real exchange student, and B, she had been putting her phone on the table each mealtime, while having it on speaker with Anna on the other end, and silently listening in my conversations. I remember when she first told me this, how I didn't believe it. I didn't believe, and a part of me still had a hard time realizing the lengths this woman was going to were real. But it was what she said to me next that terrified me the most. She said, "I know about the secret messages behind your words. I know what you're up to. And I heard a voice from above that told me it was my mission in life to keep an eye on you to make sure you behave." The abuse at school escalated quickly after this. I was harassed and cornered in every classroom and chased around school, and at the same time I got no help. It escalated into a happening one late weekend night. I was sitting in the school's texture room when a guy suddenly burst in and started running towards me screaming, "What makes you think you can sit here?" He did not go to this school. I jumped out of a window and started running towards my dorm and managed to call 112 in the meantime, the emergency number for Sweden. and managed to scream out that I needed help and where I was. I ran towards my dorm, but another guy was waiting there for me, so I ran towards the head building, but a third guy was waiting there. They cornered me, and I remembered how scared I was. I thought I was going to die. But then, a light of hope. Blue and red lights from the road. I was saved. I remember how happy I was to see that police officer. Everything would finally be over. And then... He walked up to the girl who orchestrated all of it, Malin, and greeted her like a friend, and I knew in that moment that he wouldn't save me. I screamed for help and he ignored me. She told him that there was no issue here. He said he was looking forward to seeing her around town, then he left. He left me. He just drove away. The last thing I remember is the backlights of that police car driving away. I wake up the next morning laying on the ground with a huge bump on the side of my head. I don't know what happened. Ellen claims they never touched me and I just passed out when one of the guys grabbed me. I know better. I know the pain I felt and the huge bump on the side of my head. I called 112 and I called for an ambulance. At this time, because of the abuse, I had memory loss and couldn't quite tell the lady what the issue was. But I made a mistake. I told her that I called 112 the day after and that the police officer just left me. And she got mad, really, really mad. She told me that I was slandering her coworker and to only call if I actually needed help, and then she hung up. I was alone again, with no one, not a single person on my side. I tried to make a police report against Anna and Malin, but the officer had heard about me and deleted my report. It was during this time that I had enough, and I thought about ending my own life, so I was forcefully put in a mental health ward, and the stalking didn't stop. Crazy-eyed Anna had a friend of hers be committed so she could come into the ward as a visitor in order to harass me. When I tried to go to art school again, she had people she had threaten to join the same program so they could keep an eye on me. At home, she had another guy threaten to park outside my house a few times a week in order to scare me. During this, she would also have things stolen from me, like shoes, gloves, and the like, and according to the people doing the stealing, this was because she had watched a movie where someone steals items and then puts them back to make someone go insane from the harassment. Crazy-eyed Anna would call me a few times a year lying about being a data collector to get private information out of me, something that took a few years to even catch on to. Because she lived in a big city far away at the time, she constantly forced others to do the stalking for her. Most of them had at one point given drugs to, and then would get them to do what she wanted by threatening to report them to the police if they wouldn't. Others she just bribed with money or charmed. I've gone for hour-long bus rides where someone admits to being there for her sake. Most people are afraid of her because she won't leave them alone, and she will do to them what she does to me if they don't say yes to her. One girl was roped into standing all dressed in red outside my apartment. Another girl was also roped into sitting with her car outside my house for hours a few days a week. All because of the fear of this woman. I learned from a cousin of hers that she affords all this because she won an art prize for 500,000 SEK at one point. It's why she thinks she is famous. I also learned that most of her biological family has cut contact with her because she has been doing this since she was a teenager. And yet, even with that information, no one would listen. When I tell people what she had done to me, people called me the crazy one. I have no history of delusions or of making up tall tales, yet it was so much easier for people to just think I am crazy. I have even been forcefully medicated at some points with psychosis medication that baffled doctors lamented over not working. Not even my family believes me. Something that has forever barred how much trust I can put into the relationship between us. I asked her once why she was doing all of this, and she said, "To punish you." I asked her for how long I would need to be punished, and she answered, "For as long as I want." At one point, I even considered killing her. I am the kind of person who catches flies alive in a cup and lets them out the window. I have never harmed another human being. I have never been violent. Yet at one point felt so desperate for freedom that I would take prison rather than being hunted by crazy-eyed Anna anymore. I was more afraid of her than of prison. Then, it stopped. It just stopped. Still a year later, I don't know why it stopped. Nothing in her history tells me that she would stop willingly. So I am convinced that she either has run out of people to threaten into doing her bidding, or something has happened to her. It's possible that one of those people finally reported her and actually got taken seriously. I don't know. Even so, I can't feel relief, not yet. I'm still afraid it will start again, and I have given up all hope of being taken seriously by the police. Anna, let's not meet. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 542. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. With all the hubbub this week, with the work going on outside, although I didn't hear anything today, or if there were, they didn't make much noise, because they didn't wake me up, I forgot that the person, because, they have to do everything in 1 week apparently, was coming to do the annual inspection of the heating system. Not that it makes much of a difference, doesn't stop it breaking down when the weather's really cold, but that's neither here nor there. They were coming to do their annual inspection, and I'd apparently forgot, so I'll need to call up to rearrange that. I'll do it on Friday or something, try and rearrange it for next week, sometime in the afternoon. Right, I'm considering a fry-up, if I can be bothered making it, we'll see. Then possibly games, I'm not sure what. I seem to play Phasmophobia a lot. I've been getting into No Man's Sky a bit more. It's a bit more stable than it was previously when I tried to use it in VR, because it's one of those games that I really just enjoy it for the VR experience of it. Well, it can be played on desktop. Some of the scenery is very beautiful. I may have installed some mods because they added some things to the game a while back that I really enjoyed. I kind of enjoyed the whole process of it. It made it really easy to get nanites, which aren't super hard to get anyway, but you get them in small amounts, so it takes ages to build them up. At least it does when you need like 50,000 or however many it is to upgrade your ships and things, so it can take a while. But there was a way of doing it in the game briefly that I really liked, but as often happens, some people don't like it. They have a good old whine about how they don't like it, therefore nobody gets to enjoy it. I mean, just, if you don't enjoy it, don't do it. Yeah, okay. That's enough grumbling from me. I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.